Welcome back YouTube. Today I've got a special episode for you all, and today we are going to talk about how to set up your perfect muscle building diet. Now, the first struggle that I often see people face is knowing how much calories do I actually need to eat for my body weight, for my height, for my activity levels. I'm going to give you a little bit of a cheat code here. There is a lot of formulas that you can use on the internet. And generally, as a coach, personally, I would assess the athlete's expenditure, lifestyle, body weight, musculature, training ability, and general training age. And that will give me a good reference and a guide as to how much calories they roughly will need. However, for yourself, because you likely don't have experience doing this, you can actually use a cheat code, which is calculator.net. I will pop a link in the description. It's a website at which you can pop your age, body weight, height, activity levels, and it will actually calculate an estimate of how much calories you actually need to be eating. So that is a cheat code, and that's something I am willing to give away for free, of course, as usual, for you all to use. Now, generally, the first thing that I always like to work and set is the protein goals. And the protein amount that you need to be eating, put yourself in an optimal state to gain muscle, lose body fat, generally have the best chance of maximizing muscle gain possible, both for assisted and natural athletes, is between 1 gram up to 1.5 grams of protein per pound of body weight. I know to a lot of you this may sound high. However, even with the latest research, the evidence-based crowd and the science-based educators are actually coming on board with protein needs being a little bit higher. So this is more a mixture of anecdotal evidence, which I see myself and with my clients, and general protein recommendations that I have been using and have seen the most success with amongst my athletes and clients that I've worked with in the past 12 years of coaching. So this is me not speaking from a book or any experiment or study that has been done on probably more than likely untrained individuals. This is more me speaking from experience working with athletes in the past 12 years as to what I have seen the best results with. And that always lands between 1 gram up to 1.5 grams of protein per lean pound of body weight. And generally, all my athletes are pretty lean, so that is how I would structure the protein needs. Now, what will dictate being on higher end of the scale or lower end of the scale is appetite, body composition, calorie amount. The higher carbohydrates go, the less protein you will likely need, as carbohydrates are protein sparing. So your protein needs may actually come down as you get deeper into the off season, as your calories increase, to allow for quicker gastric emptying, so quicker digestion, as protein will slow down the digestion of your food, less food volume, and generally because carbs are protein sparing, you don't quite need as much direct protein as your calories do increase. So I tend to sometimes modulate and lower the protein intake in favor of increasing more carbohydrates, especially deeper into an off-season setting. Then as we get into a calorie deficit, I do think your protein needs tend to shift more towards 1.5 grams of protein to really maximize muscle gain or muscle retention in that case. Now, when it comes to protein accommodations, I always recommend having at least 5 sources of protein within your diet. Now, I know it sounds like a lot, but thinking about it, guys, 5 sources of protein can be extremely easy to incorporate into your diet. It could be coming from eggs, protein powder, chicken, beef, fish. Super simple. And guess what, guys? Having 5 different protein sources also gives you more variety, which makes your food more palatable, gives you more enjoyment, and allows you to have a better micronutrient profile, which is equally as important. Remember, guys, it's not just about your macronutrients, which is your protein, carbs, and fats. It's also about meeting your micronutrient needs and goals, which is your vitamins and minerals that you do get from your food. So, for example, if I was to try and set a diet for someone that weighs 200 pounds. As a rough figure, I would like to see them eating around 250 grams of protein per day. So that is the first macronutrient I always like to tackle and set. Once you establish quality protein intake coming from at least 5 different sources, 4 is the minimum that I would always advise for variety and prevention of developing intolerances. As one thing that people often forget is eating the same foods over and over again actually can lead to you developing intolerance. And a lot of guys that do come to me for coaching do experience a lot of intolerances, even to chicken and rice, because their diet literally consisted of chicken and rice 5 times per day. Yes, it's easy, but 1, it's boring. 2, from a digestive standpoint, it's probably not a good idea to have lack of micronutrient variety and macronutrient variety. So, make your food enjoyable, have plenty of variety, and aim for at least 5 different sources of protein. Moving on, guys. Once you've established your protein needs and goals, we can then move on to carbohydrates and fats. How much carbs and fats you will be eating in an off-season setting when you are in a calorie surplus, it often does tend to depend on your preference. So generally, I will always speak to a client and I will roughly know, based off the feedback they give me, as to what they like the most, whether it's carbohydrates or fats, and then we can actually incorporate a little bit more fats for those who just prefer more fats in the diet, or a little bit more carbs for those that do prefer to have more carbohydrates in place. Now, if I was to set a diet for an athlete which has no preference, and we are looking to get the maximum gains possible whilst maintaining the leanest body composition we possibly can, I would shoot for a minimum of around, or again, around, because this could vary up and down depending if someone's assisted or not, would be 0.5 grams of fat per kilogram of body weight. So for an athlete that weighs 100 kilograms, I would shoot for 50 grams of fat per day, coming from polyunsaturated fat sources and monounsaturated fat sources, which would be your avocado, nuts, oils, wild fish. Again, wild fish, wild salmon does have the best fat that you can take in. And omega, a high quality omega product, is essential. I personally use 10 grams per day, with no exceptions, coming from Omega Pharma Pro. That is my baseline fat intake that I take in year round, just coming from the omegas. And the reason why I utilize a high quality omega product is because for me to get the same amount of omegas and quality fats that I'm getting from that product, I would probably need to eat around 5 kilos of salmon per day, and that's just not realistic. And if I was to do that, all my calories across the day would have to come from salmon, which is great because I love salmon, but after 2-3 days of eating just salmon, I would probably get sick of it and I would probably develop an intolerance. So generally, once you have got your protein and fat intake set, and again with fats, 0.5 grams per kilogram is a rough ballpark figure. For natural athletes, I would probably sit a little bit higher, even going up to 1 gram of fat per kilogram of body weight, which is pretty high, as calories coming from fats are much higher, because per 1 gram of fat you get 9 calories, per 1 gram of protein you get 4 calories, and per 1 gram of carbs you do get 4 calories. So you do need to take that in consideration, that when you do bump up your fats, the volume of food is lower, but the calories are much higher. Now, if I was to have an ideal diet design with perfect fat sources, I would include, that's something I do include within my diet, omegas, it's priority number 1, eggs, wild salmon, avocado, almond butter, olive oil. That is, in my opinion, the best fat sources that you can be taking in. And again, super tasty, plenty of variety, and more importantly, some fiber, especially from avocado, and plenty of micronutrients. Now, once we establish our protein amount, fat intake, which is based off preference and needs. Assisted guys, you may want to scale back on your fat intake if you want to keep your lipids in a good spot, and make sure that the fat intake that you are taking in is specifically coming from healthier fat sources, avoiding saturated fat intake, making sure that you increase poly and monosaturated fat sources within your diet. We then move on to carbohydrates. Now, first carbohydrate that I would like to cover is fruit. People are demonizing fruit through lack of knowledge, and people often cut out fruit in the diet when they go into calorie deficit, which is, in my opinion, not a great idea. One, you are cutting out a food source that's high in volume. 200 grams of strawberries has like 50 calories in it. It's tasty, it's packed full of micronutrients and fiber, which is only going to improve your health outcomes. And mixing fructose and glucose actually increases the uptake of your carbohydrates. So I personally like to mix fruit with starches with every single meal. So the way I would structure a meal would be a quality protein source, a quality fat source, carbohydrates of choice, with a fat source of choice. That is an ideal meal. So for example, it could be wild salmon, rice, avocado, and pineapple. That is actually one of my meals. Now, as my calories tend to decrease, I do tend to cut the avocado out or cut it down a little bit lower and cut down the volume of the carbohydrates. But the principle still applies with variety of carbohydrates, prioritizing fruit and veg, making sure that that stays as a baseline. And if I was to give you a baseline figure of how much fruit and veg you need, it would be a minimum of 500 grams of fruit and 500 grams of veg per day. And don't forget, guys, fruit and veg is not calorie free. It still needs to be accounted for within your calories when you set your diet up. Now, for carbohydrate sources, I do like to have variety in place. And personally, I am a massive fan of obviously rice, potato, cream of rice, fruits, low-fat sourdough bread. Main reason for that is fermented. It's amazing for gut health. And sometimes I do like to opt for stuff like buckwheat or even quinoa or oatmeal for people that do tend to digest it pretty well. Personally, I'm not a fan of oatmeal. It has always bloated me. I have never digested it well. However, when it comes to semolina, when it comes to cream of rice, anything like this, for me, it digests like a dream. So I personally like to have these different options, still having plenty of variety within my diet. Guys, this is how I would structure a perfect muscle building diet. If you are looking to gain muscle, you simply need to increase your calories through carbohydrates or fats. One thing you have to remember and be mindful of when it comes to taking that increase is when you increase your fats, your body does store fat much easier as a source of fuel and energy. So when you are in a calorie surplus and you do have excess of energy coming in and your surplus is too high, it will be much easier for your body to store fat as an energy source. So macronutrient setup and macronutrient design as a whole does play a role. Now, I'm not against fat intake, but as an athlete, you need to prioritize your carbohydrate intake because that is your primary source of fuel for energy and training performance. So if you want to gain muscle, you increase your carbohydrates. You may increase your fats when the volume of food gets a little bit too high. You may decrease your protein slightly as your calories do increase over the course of an off-season setting. In most cases, it's probably not needed, but if you are a big boy and you are eating probably 5,000-6,000 calories, that's when I do tend to lower the protein slightly if we need to from a digestive standpoint and if we need to uphold a good appetite. If you want to get lean, if you want to lose body weight, you decrease your fat a little bit, decrease your carbohydrates a little bit. In some cases, you may need to increase the protein if your protein starts to fall below that 1 gram of protein per lean pound of body weight. If I was to put a number on it, if you're looking to gain weight, roughly around 1 pound per week is what I'd be looking for. If you're looking to lose weight, around 1% of your total body weight loss per week initially, and then lowering that down to 0.5% as you do get leaner. Guys, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, please hit the like button, click subscribe. Thank you for watching, guys, and I'll see you again soon. Peace out.